That head, the one that looks like someone took an egg, tilted it slightly downward and said, "Yep, that's a dog now." No stop, no dip between forehead and nose, just one smooth, almost aerodynamic curve, like it was designed in a wind tunnel by someone who'd never actually seen a dog before. If you're a Bull Terrier person, you already love that head. You've defended it in comment sections, you've called it distinctive, you've said the words, "so ugly it's cute." And honestly, you're not wrong. It's a strange, committed, slightly unhinged look. Here's what most people assume about it, though, that it's just how the breed has always looked, some ancient, quirky accident of nature, a weird dog that's simply always been weird. That assumption is wrong. And it's not wrong in a pedantic, well, actually way. It's wrong in a way that hides a much stranger and much human story than weird dog, funny head, the end. Because that head isn't ancient. It isn't an accident. It was engineered, deliberately, gradually, over more than half a century by breeders working with a pencil, a stud book, and a very specific idea of what a fashionable dog should look like. And it was built on top of a dog that started its existence doing something far less charming, working. Some of those early dogs controlled livestock. Others were bred for one of Britain's cruelest public entertainments, fighting, on command, in front of a paying crowd. The Bull Terrier you know, the one doing zoomies at 11 p.m. for no reason, the one that's decided the couch is a trampoline, is standing on top of a bloodline that spent its early decades a long way from anyone's living room. And that famous head, the one everyone calls quirky, that came later, way later. It wasn't a birthright, it was a project. So here's the real question we're chasing today. How does a dog bred for combat end up with a head shape that looks like it belongs in a cartoon? And what does the answer actually tell us about what we've done to this breed, over and over, for nearly 2 centuries? Because the real story isn't just cute dog, funny head. It's a banned blood sport, a Birmingham dog dealer with a prison record, an all-white gentleman's companion rebrand, a genuine cross-country road trip that made headlines in 1903, a single named dog in 1917 who finally got the head right, and a genetic price tag that white bull terriers are still paying today. Let's start where the myth actually falls apart, not at a dog show and not with a pencil sketch of an egg-shaped skull. Let's start with a bull, a chain, and a crowd that came for blood. Let's actually talk about what bull baiting was, because blood sports is doing a lot of quiet, horrifying lifting in that phrase. For centuries in England, this was mainstream entertainment. A bull would be tethered to a stake in a pit. Dogs, bred specifically for this one purpose, were released to grab onto its nose or neck and simply not let go. Crowds gathered, money handed hands. This wasn't some fringe underground thing. It was public spectacle, the kind of event whole towns organized around, for centuries, without a second thought. The dogs used were early bulldog-type dogs, and they looked nothing like today's English bulldog. Historical illustrations from the 17th and early 18th centuries showed taller, more athletic animals with longer muzzles, bred generation after generation for one trait above all else, a bone-crushing bite and the willingness to hang on no matter what. That's point one, and here's the takeaway. The foundation of this breed family wasn't companionship, it was combat for cash as crowd entertainment. Then, in 1835, something shifted. Parliament passed the Cruelty to Animals Act, sometimes called the Cruel Treatment of Cattle Act, officially outlawing bull baiting, bear baiting, and several other blood sports across Britain. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine those events being considered normal. For centuries, they were. So the law changed. Officially, that's the end of it. Except, and you probably saw this coming, banning the venue doesn't ban the appetite. After 1835, the crowds didn't disappear. The demand just rerouted itself somewhere smaller and easier to hide. Ratting pits and underground dogfighting, smaller in scale, just as brutal. And here's where it gets specifically relevant to the dog you might have sleeping on your feet right now. The old bull-baiting dogs were too slow and too bulky for this new underground world. Ratting pits and fighting rings needed something quicker, something meaner in a tighter space. So breeders crossed the bulky old bulldog with the fast, wiry terrier and got exactly that. This hybrid became known very literally as the bull and terrier. No fancy branding yet, no show ring, certainly no egg-shaped head. Just a working dog, engineered for the next generation of blood sport. Because outlawing one cruelty apparently just meant the demand found two new ones to move into. Takeaway number 2, the direct ancestor of today's goofy couch potato wasn't invented to be a pet. It was a workaround, a faster, scrappier fighting dog, built specifically to survive in an underground economy that the law was actively trying to kill. And look, I get it if this is a lot to sit with. You came here for a fun dog history video, and we're talking about Victorian gambling pets. But stay with it, because this is exactly the part of the story that gets skipped in the quirky, egg-shaped dog version. The breed's real origin isn't cute. It's a law, a loophole in a dog built to fill it. So how do you get from underground fighter dog to gentleman's companion with a milky white coat? That transformation didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen slowly at first. It happened because one very specific, very unlikely man from Birmingham looked at a fighting dog and saw something else entirely. Picture Birmingham, England in the 1850s. There's a dog dealer named James Hinks, and it's worth being upfront about him because he was not exactly a model citizen. Historical accounts note he reportedly did prison time in 1855 for stealing rabbits out of a vicar's garden. Not exactly the resume you'd expect from the man who'd end up reshaping an entire breed. But dog breeding history is full of guys like this, flawed people who happen to have a very specific eye for what a dog could become. Hinks looked at the bull and terrier, that scrappy, broad-headed fighting pit dog with a reputation for violence, and decided he wanted something different, cleaner, more symmetrical, something you could put in a show ring instead of a fighting pit. Now, if you've ever heard Hinks called the inventor of the Bull Terrier, that's only partly true. Most canine historians agree he didn't create these dogs from nothing. His achievement was arguably harder. He took a loose, regional grab bag of working crosses, some white, some not, some prick-eared, some not, no single standard type, and started turning it into one recognizable, fashionable breed. Exactly which breeds he introduced remains genuinely debated. The traditional account says he crossed the old bull and terrier stock with the now extinct white English terrier. Many historians believe the Dalmatian contributed the leaner build and the white coat. Some researchers have floated later influence from the Greyhound, the Spanish Pointer, even the Borzoi, though direct documentary proof for every claimed cross simply doesn't exist. Breeding records from the 1850s weren't exactly rigorous, and canine history from this period often relies on newspaper accounts, paintings, and later recollection rather than complete stud books. So if someone confidently tells you they know every breed in the Bull Terrier's family tree, they're a little more confident than the historical evidence actually allows. What isn't disputed is Hinks' goal. He wanted a dog that looked stylish, behaved well in public, and photographed like a gentleman's companion rather than a pit dog. It's a fundamentally different project than anything that came before it. The moment the fighting dog problem quietly became an image problem. Then, in May 1862, Hinks debuted his new Bull Terrier, an all-white dog built around a dam named Puss, first in Birmingham, then at the Cremorne Gardens show in Chelsea, London. The public loved it. They loved the milky white coat, and they loved the contradiction underneath it. A good-natured dog that wasn't spoiling for a fight, but could clearly finish one if it had to. That contradiction earned the breed a nickname that's honestly pretty slick branding, the White Cavalier. There's even a rhyme from the era that sums up the whole rebrand in 2 lines. Hinks found a Bull Terrier, a battered old bum, and made him a dog for a gentleman's chum. One story from this period gets repeated constantly, though it deserves a little caution. According to later accounts, one of Hinks' white dogs, possibly Puss herself,
beat a known fighting dog in a match and walked away with barely a scratch, supposedly proving refined breeding hadn't softened the dogs underneath. It's a great story. Contemporary documentation for it, though, is thin. Modern breed historians generally acknowledge the tale, while noting it's difficult to separate fact from later legend. Stories grow, legends become marketing, marketing becomes history, and then someone eventually goes back and checks the sources, and sometimes the sources aren't nearly as dramatic. Here's what is well documented, though. The show culture Hinks was stepping into was brand new. The first modern dog show is generally recognized as taking place in Newcastle in 1859, initially for sporting breeds. Within a few years, competitive exhibitions were spreading across Britain, and appearance, consistency, and public behavior were becoming breeding priorities in a way they'd never been before. And notice something important. The head Hinks was breeding for in 1862 was not the smooth, no-stop skull you're picturing right now. Early Hinks line dogs still had a visible dip between forehead and muzzle, closer to other bull breeds of the era. The egg-shaped profile was still decades away. Hinks started the sculpting, he didn't finish it. So by the late 1800s, you've got a dog that's publicly shed its fighting pit reputation and become a show ring darling with a fashionable nickname. But its next big cultural moment doesn't happen in a British show ring at all. It happens on a dirt road in Idaho in 1903 with a doctor, a mechanic, and a $50 bet.
This one's a genuine detour from Victorian dog shows into straight-up American folklore, and it's worth every second because it shows exactly how far this breed had traveled from the pit by the turn of the century. It's 1903. A Vermont doctor named Horatio Nelson Jackson is in San Francisco, and after a few drinks at a men's club, he makes a $50 bet he can drive a car in 1903 when there were fewer than 150 miles of paved road in the entire country, from San Francisco to New York in under 90 days. Most people at the time thought automobiles were a passing novelty. Jackson thought otherwise. He hired a mechanic named Sewall Crocker and set off in a cherry-red Winton touring car. 19 days in, somewhere near Caldwell, Idaho, after a trip that had already been one long disaster of breakdowns and wrong turns, a man offered to sell Jackson a young dog for $15. Jackson bought him, named him Bud, and this detail is just objectively delightful, eventually fitted him with a tiny pair of driving goggles to keep the dust out of his eyes on the open road. Bud is widely described as a bull terrier, though a few contemporary sources muddy that and just call him a bulldog, so the record isn't perfectly clean. But the story stuck. The goggles are preserved today at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, and Bud became a genuine national celebrity as the trio made headlines in every town they rolled through, finally reaching New York on July 26, 1903, 63 days after they'd left San Francisco. Here's the takeaway. Within roughly 40 years of Hinks introducing the White Cavalier at a Birmingham dog show, a dog from this exact bloodline had gone from underground fighting pits to Victorian show rings to a road trip mascot across an entire continent as America's first road trip mascot, goggles and all. That's a remarkable arc for one breed to pull off in 2 generations. And this is a good place to say the central idea of this video out loud, because every stage we've covered so far is really the same move on repeat. Take a dog built for one purpose and repackage it for another, as a gentleman's companion, as a show dog, as a road trip icon, while the physical look of the breed keeps getting quietly reshaped underneath the marketing. But we still haven't reached the head itself, not the actual final no-stop egg shape everyone pictures. That moment was still on its way, and it came with a genetic cost the breed is still paying today. Hinks started sculpting that head in the 1860s, but he didn't live to see the finished version. He died relatively young, in his early 40s, and the project simply kept going without him. Other breeders picked up exactly where he'd left off, generation after generation, selecting for less and less of a stop, chasing a smoother, cleaner profile each time.
The breed hits its real milestone in 1917 with a dog named Lord Gladiator, widely recognized as the first bull terrier with no stop at all, a full, clean, egg-shaped curve running from skull straight to nose tip. That's the head. That's the one you're picturing right now. And it took over 50 years of deliberate, patient, selective breeding to get there, from Hinks' first white dam in 1862 to Lord Gladiator in 1917. Takeaway: that iconic look isn't a founding trait of the breed. It's closer to a 5-decade engineering project that only reached its final form well into the 20th century, more than 100 years after this bloodline began its life as a bull-baiting dog. It's worth pausing here on something the breed standard itself never actually says. Neither the Kennel Club in the UK nor the American Kennel Club describes the head as looking like an egg. They describe a long, strong head that curves gently downward from skull to nose tip, what breeders call the down face. The nickname came later because people looked at the finished profile and thought, yep, that's an egg. Fair enough. Sometimes the simplest explanation wins. And it's not the only unusual feature back there. The Bull Terrier is the only recognized breed with naturally triangular eyes, which, combined with that curved profile, is exactly what gives the face its unmistakable, slightly cartoonish expression. So the head wasn't engineered for combat. It was refined, generation after generation, for breed type. Which raises the obvious next question, because looks were only half of what breeders were reshaping.
Now let's tackle the question that follows this breed almost everywhere it goes. Are they naturally aggressive? If you've ever mentioned a bull terrier to someone, you've probably heard some version of the same warning. They were bred for fighting. It's just in their DNA. You can't really trust them. Like a lot of popular beliefs, there's a small historical truth buried inside a much larger misunderstanding. Yes, this breed's ancestors included dogs associated with blood sports before those activities were outlawed in 1835. Some early bull and terrier crosses were genuinely valued for courage and physical toughness, and those traits didn't vanish overnight just because Parliament passed a law. But here's the part that usually gets skipped. Once organized dog breeding took hold in Victorian Britain, temperament became just as important as appearance to reputable breeders, for a very practical reason. Think about a 19th century show ring for a second. Judges needed to walk up to each dog, handle its head, check its teeth, assess its structure. A genuinely uncontrollable animal simply didn't fit into that world. So breeders were selecting for steadier temperaments right alongside the cleaner profile and the white coat. The nickname White Cavalier was never just about the color. It described an aspiration: courageous without being quarrelsome, confident without being unstable. Like any breed nickname, it was a hope, not a guarantee, because no breed can guarantee personality. Modern research backs that up directly. Studies by researchers including Dr. James Serpell at the University of Pennsylvania have shown that behavior comes from a combination of genetics, early socialization, training, health, and an individual dog's own experiences. Breed can shape tendencies. It doesn't determine any one dog's behavior. You've probably met two dogs of the same breed who acted nothing alike. Exactly, same principle. The American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior has made the same point more bluntly. Judging any dog's behavior on breed alone is unreliable. Responsible ownership, proper socialization, and humane training do far more heavy lifting than ancestry ever will. None of that means every breed is interchangeable, though. Bull Terriers are widely recognized for persistence, energy, confidence, and a kind of relentless playfulness. Owners often describe them as clowns trapped inside muscular little bodies. Honestly, watch one invent an entire game out of absolutely nothing for 5 minutes, and you'll understand exactly what people mean. They're creative. Let's call it creative. Those same qualities are also why the breed needs consistent training and real mental stimulation.
The Bull Terrier Club and major kennel clubs regularly stress that this is a dog for owners ready to put in the time. So here's a myth worth retiring for good. The Bull Terrier isn't defined by its fighting ancestry any more than a Border Collie is defined only by sheep. History explains where a breed came from. It doesn't lock every individual dog into that past forever. Selective breeding reshaped this breed's body over generations, and changing expectations reshaped its temperament right alongside it. The breed wasn't standing still. Neither was the society breeding it. But there's one more transformation left to talk about, and it's the one still playing out right now in real time, in veterinary clinics rather than history books. Because engineering that famous look didn't come free, and by the middle of the 20th century, the bill was already coming due.
When breeders focus intently on one specific look, they inevitably narrow the pool of genes moving into future generations. Responsible breeders manage that carefully. Health testing, thoughtful pairing, real oversight. But maintaining a highly distinctive breed always carries risk. The Bull Terrier is no exception, and the clearest example is sitting right there in that famous white coat. Hereditary deafness is one of the best documented concerns in the breed, particularly in white Bull Terriers, and it traces directly back to the same genetics that made the White Cavalier so photogenic in Victorian show rings back in 1862. The condition is tied to genes affecting coat pigmentation, not head shape. White-coated dogs across several breeds, not just this one, carry a higher risk of congenital deafness because of how pigment-producing cells develop in the inner ear during embryonic growth. Research led by veterinarian scientists, including work by Dr. George M. Strain at Louisiana State University, has helped breeders understand and screen for this using the BAER test, the Brainstem Auditory Evoked Response. Today, responsible breeders routinely BAER test puppies before making breeding decisions. That's an important point on its own. Modern breeders aren't ignoring this. Many are actively working against it. There's a second, much rarer inherited condition worth naming plainly because it's genuinely the darkest line in this entire story: lethal acrodermatitis. It's a heritable disorder, seen almost exclusively in white Bull Terriers, that affects skin, growth, and immune function, and it's typically fatal. It's uncommon, but it's real, and it's a direct legacy of decades of narrow, closed-line breeding chasing one very specific look. The health picture doesn't stop there. Hereditary nephritis, an inherited kidney disease, has affected some bloodlines, though genetic screening has meaningfully reduced how often it appears. Some Bull Terriers can also inherit forms of congenital heart disease, including mitral valve abnormalities, which is why veterinary cardiologists recommend cardiac screening for breeding dogs. And white-coated dogs, with their lighter pigmentation, tend to run more prone to skin sensitivity and sunburn. One more quiet reminder that chasing a striking appearance can carry biological costs early breeders had no way of understanding. And they really didn't. Back in the 50s and 60s, Grender Mendel's work on heredity had barely begun circulating, and it wouldn't be widely recognized until the early 20th century. Victorian breeders were working from careful observation alone, no genetics, no DNA. That's an enormous difference between what Hinks could have known and what breeders know now. Today, kennel clubs and breed organizations place far more emphasis on health than most people realize. The Bull Terrier Club in the UK and similar organizations worldwide actively encourage testing for hearing, kidney function, cardiac health, and other inherited conditions as standard practice. Is every breeder equally responsible about it? No, just like with any popular breed, some prioritize a quick litter over long-term welfare, which is exactly why finding a genuinely reputable breeder or choosing a rescue matters as much as it does. So here's where all of this actually lands. The breed's greatest modern challenge was never its unusual head, it's preserving that look without sacrificing the health underneath it. A challenge shared by plenty of purebred dogs, and one that better genetics, honest testing, and responsible breeding continue to chip away at every year.
Think about what you're actually doing every single day with a dog like this. You're taking an animal descended from dogs bred quite literally to survive violence in a pit and teaching it that the scariest thing in its entire world is an empty toilet paper roll. You're wrapping it in a sweater because it's 40 degrees out and it's shivering on your lap. You're letting it sleep under the covers, on your pillow, breathing directly in your face because personal space is apparently never a concept it agreed to. That's not a small thing. That's the exact same impulse James Hinks had back in 1862, just gentler and with none of the marketing. He looked at a fighting dog and thought, I bet I can turn this into something a family could love. Every owner who's ever fallen for that ridiculous egg-shaped head, who's ever forgiven a 3 a.m. Zoomy session or a couch that didn't survive the week, is doing the exact same work he started. You're not just keeping a pet, you're continuing a rebrand that's been running for over 160 years now, taking something built for combat and choosing, on purpose, every single day to make it soft.
Let's run the whole thing back, start to finish, because once you see the timeline laid out in order, the myth doesn't just crack, it collapses. First, for centuries, early bulldog-type dogs existed to control livestock and, far more darkly, to fight tethered bulls in front of paying, betting crowds. No companionship, no show ring, just controlled violence as public entertainment. Takeaway: the foundation of this breed family is combat, full stop. Then, 1835, the Cruelty to Animals Act bans bull baiting across Britain, and instead of ending the cruelty, it just reroutes it. Breeders cross bulldog with terrier to build a faster, scrappier dog for the new underground world of ratting and dogfighting. Takeaway: the direct ancestor of today's bull terrier wasn't a pet in the making, it was a legal workaround for banned violence. Next, the 1850s. James Hinks, a Birmingham dog dealer with an actual prison record, starts crossing that fighting stock with the extinct white English terrier, chasing a cleaner look and a calmer public reputation. Takeaway: this is the exact moment the fighting dog project quietly becomes an image project. Then, May 1862, Hinks debuts his all-white new Bull Terrier in Birmingham and at Cremorne Gardens in Chelsea. The public falls for it completely, and it earns the nickname the White Cavalier. Takeaway: within one generation, a pit-fighting bloodline gets rebranded into a fashionable status symbol for wealthy Victorians. Then, 1903, a genuine detour into American folklore. A bull terrier named Bud rides shotgun, tiny driving goggles and all, across the entire United States with Horatio Nelson Jackson on the first transcontinental car trip in history, becoming a national celebrity along the way. Takeaway: 40 years after Hinks's rebrand, this bloodline has traveled from underground pits to America's first road trip mascot. Then, 1917, a dog named Lord Gladiator becomes the first bull terrier with the full, no-stop, egg-shaped head, the exact profile you picture right now, more than 50 years in the making. And tucked right behind that milestone sits the cost, the same tight, look-focused breeding that built that head also locked in real health liabilities: hereditary deafness, lethal acrodermatitis, kidney and heart disease that white bull terriers are still living with today. And finally, modern veterinary science, hearing tests, cardiac screening, genetic research, the tools breeders now have and Victorian breeders never did to keep shaping this breed responsibly instead of blindly. 7 points, one straight line: violence, ban, rebrand, celebrity, sculpture, cost, and finally, responsibility. Every stage of this breed's history is the same move repeated. Take a dog built for one purpose and repackage it for another, while the physical look keeps getting reshaped underneath the marketing every single time. So here's the sentence worth remembering: the Bull Terrier's famous head isn't a relic of violence, and it isn't an accident of nature either.
It's the end product of a 160-year rebrand, one that started in a Birmingham dog pit, survived a cross-country road trip, and ended up right here, on your couch, headbutting you awake at 6 a.m. for absolutely no reason, being completely and gloriously ridiculous. That's a legend worth keeping alive. Thanks for watching Furever Legends, where every breed has a story worth telling, and every story helps us understand the bond between humans and dogs a little bit better. Until next time, take care of your companions. One day, they will become part of history too.